what's your sort of strategy to change the game for people? If people are listening now like, oh yeah, I went through 3 years of therapy, it didn't work. They didn't break that cycle. They didn't get off of it. So how do you do that?
I think interesting that your podcast is called You Go First, because that is what makes life move, is that you make a decision about something that you're going to do in your life and you do it.
All right. You go first.
No, you go first.
You go first.
Lain, you go first.
You go first.
Lain,
All
go
right.
first.
Today we're going first. So I am with Karen Rose here, a good friend and marriage and family therapist.
Yep.
So here we are at You Go First. So big welcome to Karen Rose. Thanks for being here today with us.
Welcome.
All right. Awesome. So if you haven't watched any episodes before, so You Go First is designed to help people, inspire people, give them information or content that inspires them to go first. And, when actually this episode, and I don't like to timestamp things, but last week Kobe Bryant died.
Yeah.
And that was pretty intense, I think, in some ways, just as through a society of just like, wow, I didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming.
Right.
And of course, we live in Chico, California, which is near Paradise, where so many people's houses were burned down, families displaced, destroyed, a lot of suffering in our local community.
A lot of loss.
Yeah. So when you and I have had conversations about your work with families in crisis and things, I thought, wow, the ability to go first, you have to have courage, you have to have things. So I thought, who better to have in here on You Go First today than you, and help us kind of understand the tools that you help teach people so that they have the courage or perspective or insight so that they can go first to start changing their lives or getting unstuck.
Yeah.
So with that, let's just start with the fun stuff, which is, Karen, where'd you grow up and how did you get into therapy, family therapy? Why, how'd that happen?
Yeah. So I was born in the Bay Area, like a lot of people, but moved to Chester, California, right up the hill when I was 3. My parents decided to cash in the Bay Area life and go move where they vacationed, and made a leap and said, we're going to raise our family in this environment where there's a family rich place where we can be a part of this and be out of the hubbub. I loved growing up in the mountains. I loved growing up in a small town. It was fantastic. So I feel really proud of my parents for making that brave choice to make a change and do something that was a real risk. So that's cool.
Well, when you talk about family, a lot of the people who listen to the podcast are maybe business owners or they're employees in some company. And I always, when I'm looking out at a crowd of people, I'm looking at, sons and daughters that are now in their careers, or parents or coaches of their kids' teams, and people who take the leap into a marriage or into a lifelong relationship as a parent or as a loved one, and a lot of times those things go south. So, the ability to show up at work and be productive, or in life and be productive, a lot of times has to do with the value we find in our relationships and the skills we take to those. So as your family moved and you're this kid growing up in the mountains, and we're pretty close to those mountains still.
We are,
You found yourself, I imagine, in college and thinking, what am I going to do with my life and my skills? What are some things about you, maybe as a person, that lend themselves well to being a therapist? And then what got you into this field? And then let's start talking about, how you're changing lives or how you're helping people.
Okay. I definitely feel gifted to be a therapist. I feel like I'm made, if you will, to be a therapist. It's my purpose. It is not hard for me. I sometimes I'm surprised that it's a job, though it's heavy and it's meaningful, and can be really terrible to hear some of the stuff that people go through. It is always a privilege for me to sit with people and be a part of their coming through that and sitting in that sometimes, and then overcoming and going and moving out into life again. So I think I have the greatest job in the world. So I couldn't wait to get off that mountain that I love so much. And I was excited to go to a cool school, and I had some roots and connections down in San Luis Obispo. So Cal Poly became in my sights, and I set my focus on getting in. And back in the day when it wasn't all numbers and computers, I met with the dean of my school. And I said, I need to come here. I didn't have amazing grades. And I got in, and that was a thrill. So I picked my major at Cal Poly because I knew more than anything. I did want to be educated, of course, and wanted to have a career. Wasn't sure exactly what that would be. But I picked my major because I wanted to be a mom. And I didn't want a career that would take away from that. I wanted one that would add to that. And so being a mom, being a part of a family was so essential for me in my quality of life. So human development popped out for me of majors on the Cal Poly catalog. So I was a human development major with a family studies concentration. And about a year in, I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. So the rest is just a few twists and turns, but got my degree, Bachelor of Science at Cal Poly in Human Development Family Studies, got my master's degree at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, another amazing chapter of my life. And then just kind of went to worked in Salt Lake City for a while. I worked in Los Angeles. I've worked in Seattle. And now I work in Chico, where I chose to raise my family. So. Well,
awesome. And I know you have two great kids that are they're starting to get grown up a little bit. And, so as I think about what it means, I mean, to be in leadership is you have to have a certain degree of psychology, an understanding of people and patterns we fall into. To be in sales, you have to understand those things. To be a mom, you have to understand those things. To be human, if you're good at it, is to understand those things. So, it's one thing like in therapy, you're asking questions and people are answering, but it's like, I ask questions of friends all the time, and sometimes they find themselves just spinning on the same thing year after year after year. And I think people listening right now are like, oh, great. How is it fun to listen to people tell you their problems all day? And how do you get people, how does therapy work? How do you get people off of that treadmill of I'm just telling another person about, my problems?
Right.
Because if I'm going to go first, I have to go first to break a cycle in maybe my own thinking first. So what's your sort of strategy to change the game for people? If people are listening now, like, oh yeah, I went through years of therapy, it didn't work. They didn't break that cycle. They didn't get off of it. So how do you do that?
Yeah. I think interesting that your podcast is called You Go First, because that is what makes life move, is that you make a decision about something that you're going to do in your life and you do it. And so therapy for me is effective for my clients when I can find that place in their life where they can find traction and they can find movement. That very, very rarely, if ever, I hate to say an absolute, so I'm going to say it like that, involves something else out here changing. It has to do with identifying things in here that I can find movement in, sometimes accepting the things out here that are hard, losses, tragedies, traumas, but always how I respond here, how I organize myself here, how I take care of myself here. That's what creates that shift and that change and makes people feel like they are making progress. And I would say that for me, sometimes the hard work of therapy is helping people identify things that are hard, because our ego kind of takes a hit when we see a fault in ourselves, but that's actually where the power is where we're at fault, or where we're not owning something that we need to own. When we can have that reflected and have someone sit with us lovingly and compassionately and without shame, say, hey, have you thought about this? Let's take a look at that. Hey, maybe that came into your person because of something out of your control and you've adapted to it, but do you need it? Do you want it? What could we do instead of it? So that bravery, as you mentioned when we started, that's really the whole name of the game, right? It's being brave enough to look at yourself and say, this has to change, or I can't get there.
But it's so easy to just go, oh, it's the economy, it's the politics, it's the fire, it's my spouse, it's my kid, it's, the neighbor. I mean, it's, like you said, how do we find that power? I mean, we've probably all heard that, as far as like finding my power, but how do you convince someone? I mean, how do we do that? In ourselves, it sounds like first, but I don't know. It's a very perplexing kind of situation that I think so many people are in, where they really don't understand what it feels like to have full accountability for a choice I'm making.
Because it's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful to sit in loss. It's painful to sit in post-campfire life and remember everything that you don't have anymore. You know, I can't tell you the number of clients that I sat with that were like, I have to buy Christmas tree ornaments. You know, you collect those for 40 years. And now I'm going and buying stupid ones at the store. Like that doesn't even, it's sitting in the pain all the time. And sometimes that's so overwhelming that it's easier just to get mad at this or to blame that, right? So in order to sit with pain and sit in acceptance, we usually can't do that alone. So whether you call on God or whether you call on friends or whether you call on your partner or a therapist, we have to be connected in our pain. We don't do it well all by ourselves.
Yeah, you said something about like, I think you said guilt or like when I'm telling somebody my problem, you used the word there just a second ago around
shame, maybe?
Yeah, shame. Like that's a big word. Like, you know, when people are saying, oh, well, this happened, and then they make them, well, you're the one who married him, or you're the one who this, and like somehow take away their power with shame. How do we cope with shame of things that when we do accept the responsibility for where we are,
right,
then we accept responsibility that we got ourselves here.
Right.
And I think a natural leap is I made a mistake.
But you aren't a mistake. That's the difference, right? And that definition is flying around everywhere. Guilt is about what you do, and it's correctable. Shame is about who you are.
So, wait a second. Say that again. Guilt is about, say that again.
About what you do, your behavior. I did something wrong. I feel guilty. Like, and maybe I should to help prompt me to not do it wrong again.
Yeah.
Right? We have to move through it. But shame is about I am wrong. There's something in me fundamentally not okay.
Yeah.
And when we start to identify things like I am the problem or you, my partner, are the problem, that's usually never the case. Because we are not, we're amazing. People are amazing. People are resilient. People restart again and again and again. People are loving. People sometimes are jerks, but that's their behavior.
Well, I want to somehow create a conversation here that would inspire a parent to have their kids listen to this. Because when you're talking about that feeling of like, I am something. Yeah. And I think that, you know, there's so much of that going on right now, whether it's social media, whether it's whatever's, you know, where we're taking in all of this information and all of this sort of validation through likes on my Instagram or TikTok or whatever they're doing. And somehow they don't have that grounded sense that, like you said, people are amazing. I'm a person. I must be amazing. Like the short leap there somehow has been dramatically derailed. What do you think is, not to make this generation wrong, because I don't think that's the case, but what is the biggest challenge for this generation, these high school kids? You have high school kids and college kids. What is the skill that you think they need to find the most to be successful and not?
I'm supposed to answer that question?
Well, you get to ask the questions.
That makes teenagers, you know,
if you see
amazing.
That spark in somebody, you're like, bam, we're on the road to it being different.
Yeah. I do think that we outsource, whether we're teenagers or older, but probably more in the social media climate of today. We outsource our identification. So I do think that's a problem with shame. Because shame, endurance, or resilience, Brene Brown wrote all about it. She talks about it. She's been amazing for our culture in speaking into this. So the shame resilience piece is really about my belief of who I am, my internal value of who am I right now. And kids often do the likes or the you didn't call me right back, you must hate me, you know, whatever it is. There's this instant grat thing happening all the time. When I snap you, I know that you've watched me, you know. Yeah. And it gives them a little adrenal hit, a little like, yeah. And then that comes from external. So if it's just external and they don't grow internal, right? Self-identification and understanding of who they are. When I said earlier about being a therapist, I just feel called to be that. Like I feel like I'm created to be that. That's internal. That's not because people said, oh, Karen, you're a good listener, or oh, Karen, you're a good person, or you have good values. That's because I got in me, I understood in me that there was this thing in me that said, you're a helper. That's who you are. So how can you most effectively help? So when we start to parent our kids, right? And if we say the old, this is not an uncommon thing that you hear, good boy, good girl, bad girl, that doesn't help identification at all. That's about guilt. That's about behavior. That's about how they're reflected. Identification is, wow, look at how you did that. Look at how you built that shelf in your room that now houses all of these pieces so that you can access your stuff better. You did that. You thought that up. That's really cool. It's appreciating their creativeness, appreciating how they manifest, how they actualize, whether they're 3 or 18. So I do think the social media stuff and the come at you kind of informational society that we live in, I do think makes it a challenge for kids to slow down enough internally to try to get to know themselves. And even for us as parents to slow down and get off of our phones enough to see our kids, to sit across a dinner table, to do a project with them, right? To just be a part of their world. So I do think that those things disrupt and they're a challenge. But every generation has had their challenge.
Yeah.
This just is ours.
When you're talking about youth and, these immediate things, I can't help but feel like somehow the cycle of like patience with change, with affirmation, with self like fulfilling behaviors is, I made a decision last week to be different and this week it still feels the same. Like, I think it requires a lot of patience to do therapy and to go first to start changing your life. Do you see that as far as just like really getting people inspired to like, hey, trust me, in 6 months, things are going to be different. It's not going to happen in 6 days or 6 hours or, how do we increase our appetite for sort of like a farmer plants a seed and knows, hey, it's going to be 6 months or 6 years before this tree produces nuts or whatever it is. Like,
right.
As human beings, do you think we're becoming more impatient with change, even, or with discovering ourselves or our purpose and things like that?
I guess I have 2 thoughts. My experience in my office is that when people find something real and solid, which I work pretty hard to help them identify quickly, whether it's a problem or an asset. Some people have more capacity so they can deal with the problems quicker. Some people need some building up and some rapport and some things to be able to help them hold the problems.
Like people think, oh, I'm a good person. And then they find themselves in high school and they don't have as many friends as they thought they'd have. And they don't have any of that. Or I know life's going to be, I'm 52. I look back at my life. I'm like, how did I get here? Like so many good things have happened. But when it was happening, I felt myself impatient. So those people who are like, I have to buy Christmas ornaments, they're in this immediate moment of like, I want it to be like it was. I want my house rebuilt. I want my Christmas ornament. I want my 50-year blankets back, and like, it's so hard to rebuild that I think sometimes people don't start because it seems so far before they'll have the relationship.
Yeah. So impatience in the sense of waiting, in the sense of being able to have some hopefulness maybe along the way that things will get better. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like, as a therapist, if I'm sitting down and I'm thinking of my own life and how I can make change happen and when I'm feeling a setback. And like I say, I started thinking about the Kobe Bryant thing, like, wow, when something unexpected happens and we get stopped, how do we get restarted toward a vision that we have of what's possible?
Right. Well, I would say what we don't do well in society right now is pull over. That sometimes when something happens, like for Kobe's family, for his living members of his family and his close friends, and even us as a society that appreciates and has admiration for him, we have to pull over. We have to pull over and the wheels do come off and it looks ugly and it's sad and it's hard and everybody's angry and we want to make a reason why. And, like there's all of that. There's confusion and chaos that happens when something terrible happens. and we have to make space for it. So we can't just all of a sudden be in gear and, go through a textbook and be so mature. And no, we need to be a hot mess for a while. Like, we need to be able to say, the wheels have come off. This tragedy trumps everything else. When Campfire happened, the wheels came off for those that were driving down that mountain, for those that received them when they came down the mountain, for those that were affected ripple-like from that. The wheels came off, and we all had to pause, and we all had to stop.
Now, I love that metaphor of like pulling over, but I picture like a pit stop in an Indy 500. Like, I want to pit stop as fast as I can to get back out in the race. And how do we know when we need therapy? Just like, I imagine to some degree, I like to look at therapy like going to the dentist. Like, everybody needs to go. Don't wait till all your teeth are rotten.
That's a good idea.
It's just like a little maintenance goes a long way.
Yeah.
So is there a point in people's life, people who are listening and going, I want to go first, but man, I can't get out of this. How do I know, like, wow, I'm really stuck and I need to get some professional help, or I'm really stuck, I need to just go on vacation? Like, is there any sense for people to know when they really need to go to a professional?
Well, that's a great question, because it's different for different people. And sometimes people have such low-grade dissatisfaction with their life for so long, they don't even really see it. They just think this is just how life is. Life is just hard. Life, you just don't wake up happy. You're just tired all the time. That's just how it is, right? And that's not true. You shouldn't be. Something's wrong if your body's telling you that it's stressed all the time, if your spirit is low or melancholy. And then where we usually get people is because kids are failing at school or using substances, or marriages are falling apart, or they're in some sort of functional crisis that says, identify a problem. We have those bells that go off in our lives, and that's usually why people choose to go to therapy. But if you can choose to go to therapy before that happens, think about the power that gives you to direct your life. If you can choose to take care of your stuff and identify who you are and learn to not live in shame, think about how much stronger and better you come as a mom, as a partner, as a colleague, as a worker, right? So I think in terms of knowing the time of the when to go to therapy, it does look different for all of us. And it is a big commitment. It's a time commitment. It's not the dentist that you see every 6 months. It's weekly. It's a lot of money. Like, it's a big deal. But when you organize your life well and you reduce your stress and you increase your life satisfaction.
How much is that worth?
How much is that worth?
I mean, time and money wise.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because it's like, I'm sure, and I know you can't tell us stories about this patient said this or that, but I can imagine in general, people probably come in feeling a little like, I don't know, my wife and I, and we need this, or I'm here and I parked to like 3 blocks away and I walked in, I came in the back door. Do you see the light just go off at the end where they're just like, I'm so glad I started this.
That's one of my favorite things, right? When they're like, I thought this was going to be a sham. I did not have any idea that I could really be helped and my life could change and be better. I get calls pretty regularly, actually, from kids that went away to college, or people that have now moved on and gotten married and had babies, and they're like, I wouldn't be here if we didn't do this work. And I quickly remind them, you did the hard work. You said yes. If I had your language, you went first in your life and you chose to take the reins and do something different. So you chose to pull over and deal with that sexual assault. You chose to go ahead and take care of your eating disorder. You chose to deal with that addiction. Like, you chose first. You went first, so that you can go on and have a great career, so that you could go on and have great families, so that you could be happy, so that you could be purposeful, so that you could affect your community for greater good, right?
That's so interesting to hear you talk. I think that some people, like you said, they just surrender to like, my life's going to suck. It's painful. Awful. It's terrible. My relationships are bad, and they just get used to just it being hard. But sooner or later, I heard a doctor say the other day that just like, your physiology will sooner or later show your stress. If you're 100%. you're going to have abdominal issue. You're going to have a heart issue. I had a man on the podcast here who was dead for 38 minutes because he had the widowmaker heart attack because of stress. If you don't cope with that as a leader in companies or as a leader of your family or whatever, it's like it comes out in addiction, drug, alcohol, violence, abuse. You know, people who were abused turn and they abuse. Like, what's wrong with us as humans? We're destined to. We have such possibility to be balanced and beautiful and powerful, but we get into these cycles of just terrible stuff. Right.
Well, you said the word surrender. That's it. That's the thing. It's the surrender. It's the pull over. It's the be able to say, I see the thing that I'm doing in my life that's not producing good, and I want to change it. And I don't know how, and I don't even know if I can, but I want to try. It's surrendering to those hardships that have come at you that are out of your control and not your fault. You don't pick your parents, right? You don't pick the traumas that come. You don't pick natural disaster. You don't pick it. But you choose whether you deal with it or not in a way that will build you up and make you stronger. I tell people a lot, because we deal with things like this, and I tell them a lot, we're never going to celebrate that tragedy. I'm never going to tell you, you just need to be happy and thankful that that really bad thing happened. We're always going to say that sucked and that was terrible and hard. But right away, we're going to say, and look at you. Look at how you built that bookcase. Look at how you got through that. Look at how you are resilient in it. Look at how much stronger you are because you moved in that way and you said yes.
You said work, like I put in the work, you said work a few times. And I think it's hard, like for people to really understand the level of work and maintenance it takes every day to stay on track and not get stuck. Once we are stuck, it is so hard to get out. So of course, for young people to try to recognize the patterns early as parents, to try to guide them as employees, you're talking about like, you know, we don't pick natural disasters, but people they decide to go to a job they hate for 20 years.
They do.
You know, and they're not driving up and picking them up from their house and handcuffing them. And, you know, they drive there every day. They, you know, come home every night to something that might be terrible. And they feel like, well, I'm not in control. They are in control.
They are. The choices are hard. Sometimes to get out of our circumstance, it is a very painful choice. And we have to grieve deeply, even though it's the right choice. So that's really challenging. Yeah.
Well, you know, in the spirit of work, like when I look around and I just look at my life, like, okay, I've got 4 remotes and now they're just one, and I got my Wi-Fi and I can adjust the temperature in the house on my phone, and this phone's easier, and the iPhone 17B is even easier than the one before. Like everything is telling us easier. I can meet somebody on social media. I can just swipe left and this, you know, it's like everything's easy. And then the real heart of life is hard. So we're in kind of this weird tug of war between everything telling us that if you're doing it right, it should be easy. And then the reality is if you're doing it right, it's hard. Like going to the gym. You're not going to go to a gym and say, that gym's really easy. You're like, well, you're probably not getting in better shape.
Yeah. But there's a difference between hard under your own power, under your own will, and hard that's been put on you. There's a difference with that. So if I go to the gym, I'm choosing the gym, right? But if I have to drive down the mountain in a fire, I'm not choosing that, and that's so hard.
Yeah, right.
So there's a difference. The grief looks different. And some of what therapy does is it says this is going to be hard and this is going to be work, and we're going to look at really painful things, but we're going to the gym. We're getting stronger. We're not going to re-traumatize, to just sit in your pain. We're going to hold you in your pain and help you move up out of it.
Yeah.
So I do think there's different kinds of work, if you will.
Well, I think that's cool what you said about we're not going to because I think in some relationship people just traumatized. They just like talk about, oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, it's terrible. And I feel somehow like productive because I just went through that emotion for another 3 hours with a friend who also had that situation. Yeah. But there's no progress that comes from that. And I almost feel like you're talking about like the ability as a therapist to separate between like a fire or cancer or things that happen to us and things that we're continuing to put ourselves in. and helping recognize like, this is something you're putting yourself in,
Yes.
and this is something you can get yourself out of.
Yes.
But it's going to be hard work,
Yes.
and you're going to need a sort of tour guide to help you through it.
Yep. Yep. And so, and the things that happen to you, right? Those are things that we sit in and we learn acceptance with, and we understand our lack of control in, our victimization, if you will. People hate that word, but we are on some level victims to things that happen. We are not in control of everything, but we're in control of our choice.
We're not in control of everything. I mean, that's so spot on. And recently, just things that I've gone through, I'm feeling like, hey, acceptance is my closure.
It is.
And it's been a kind of mantra that I've had a few times. Each time I try to like worm in deeper and try to figure it out, I'm just like, acceptance is the only closure I can have.
Right.
And whether it's a fire or in physical terms with paradise, or a fire in a personal relationship, it's just like, I can't change it, but we want so badly to control our lives.
It's painful.
I mean, we're such crazy creatures. Yeah. I mean, no wonder you love your work, because
I love it. It's totally dynamic.
We're so weird. We want adventure and growth and life, and I want promotions, but I want to be safe. I want predictability. I want control.
Yeah, there's a tension there.
I want, the best relationship I could possibly have, and all these dynamic things happen in my life, but I want to make sure I know exactly what my spouse wants and needs. And all the time, and it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what to say other than
hang on, buckle up.
And in that spirit, like any sort of advice what's your big piece of advice, or who's a mentor to you, or what's your favorite quote that you come back to personally when you find yourself? Just
I don't know if I have a quote.
Bring us home here of
I am right now loving the Maya Angelou quote of, and I won't say it exactly because I'm terrible at these things, but the whole, once you know better, do better. I love that because to me, it's just, it pulls on our will, what we want to do, what we can do, what we will do. That's what we're about. What happens to us, we got to pull over and accept. We got to pull over and grieve. We got to hope that somebody can help hold our head, because sometimes it's really hard. So, but what we choose to do out of that, right? That's where we do better. And I just think there's always room to do better. There's always new things to accomplish. Whether you add a risk in your life and you go accomplish some crazy goal, or whether you have to come out of some negative stuff that's really challenging. I just think we, as humans, we're so resilient. We're so amazing. It's just cool. It's cool to be a person. It's cool to journey through life. And not every day do I feel like it's cool. Like some days I got to pull over and hang my head down and have people that love me well, including you and your family, hold my head. And, I go through my own things too, because everybody does. Yeah,
that's the dentist goes to the dentist.
I've logged my hours. Yeah.
Well, Karen, I love this topic. I love, we talk a lot about how do people go first, but when people are stuck, they really need your wisdom, and people who are like you that really feel like, hey, my role is to do this, to not only have the appetite to hear people struggle and to feel that, but to be like an investigator, deciphering for where's a new perspective, where's a new piece of evidence that I can use to convince this person that they have more control than they realize and more power than they realize.
Right.
And
so it's here.
Yeah.
Right? It's me being able to see that it's there. Yeah. That's where it is. It's not my wisdom. It's my ability to help you see what you need to do to move. That's the magic of therapy.
Yeah. Well, lots to say on that, but Karen, a big thank you for taking time to be here today and share your wisdom. I know, life is a great journey, and I'm blessed to have you be a part of the Odyssey journey, the You Go First journey, to watch you grow and thrive in your life and see your business booming and tragically booming, because there is so much need, but there is so much need, whether we're here to serve that need or not, and there is a great demand for people to feel safe about turning to professionals, turning to people with training to help them. Right. There's very few people in paradise trying to rebuild their own house.
Right. Right.
You know, they immediately go, my house burned down.
I need help.
I need a professional contractor.
Right.
So
Right.
if my life burns down, I need a professional to help me rebuild.
Right.
And it may be my design, but
Yeah.
I need someone to help me rebuild that. So.
Yeah. And therapy is a part of the rebuilding. It's not revisiting the trauma, which is what keeps people out of therapy a lot. They think, oh, I got to go think about all that. Well, yeah, but we're rebuilding.
Yeah.
So it's part of the healing.
Well, thanks for being here on You Go First. So
Thank you.
I hope that people will find Karen. We'll put some social media links up if you want us to share things like that, or certainly anybody can put questions at the on the Facebook or on the YouTube at the bottom, and we'll find a way to get those answers to people. So with that, a huge thank you from You Go First to Karen. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of You Go First. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to listen to another episode, you can find us at yougofirst.live, or you can see more about our host, Lain Hensley, on his Instagram at OneDreamChaser. To learn more about his company, Odyssey Teams Inc., go to odysseyteams.com or follow all their social media channels at Odyssey Teams. Thanks again, and we hope that you will go first to share our podcast with a friend or colleague. Now, you go first.
Don't forget to like us on the button below. Follow us by clicking the bell. You'll get all future episodes, as well as you can certainly find the podcast on the audio version everywhere where podcasts are found. So we're looking forward to the next episode. Got a lot of really exciting guests coming up.